Well, hello again, YouTube. It's Petey Two Finger. In this video, I thought I would talk about my Roger Waters concert experiences. So I have not missed a Roger Waters tour. Although in this video, I'm not going to cover stories from every time I saw him. I would have to sit down with pencil and paper and write all that out. I'm just going to tell some stories about. So the first time when I got to see Roger, now I suppose I should give some history about Pink Floyd. I graduated high school in 1985. And at that time, Van Halen was huge. Bands like Quiet Riot, Rat, Motley Crue. MTV was the thing to do after school. You'd sit around with your buds in the basement of whoever's parents' house was cool to let you hang out there, smoking cigarettes, drinking a Pepsi, uh, watching MTV. You know, maybe smoking something you weren't supposed to smoke. uh, I mean, everybody everybody that I knew smoked cigarettes and weed too. Back then, it it was not normal if you didn't smoke cigarettes and marijuana. It was just how it was. And people were starting to do coke. You know, even the high school kids. The guy in my neighborhood who started out as a pot dealer was selling small, quarter ounce bags of marijuana for $40. He was selling cocaine. I mean, he hadn't transitioned over. He still sold marijuana but within about a year, he really wasn't selling much marijuana. It was all cocaine sales. He had a beeper that was going off constantly, and so it was a transitional time, and even in pop music was becoming a whole different thing. There was synthesizer music, the stuff that was being played on the radio stations here in Chicago. The majority of it was synthesizer music. It was more pop. Bands like the British New Wave stuff, Duran Duran, Flock of Seagulls, Mexican Radio, Soft Cell. This type of stuff was really popular. Now, Pink Floyd was an odd duck. They weren't what they are now, where like everyone knows Pink Floyd. Um, Pink Floyd was an exclusive club for smart people, kind of. It seemed like the people that were into Pink Floyd had a basic understanding of psychedelics, of psychology, and they were people that had more than one album. They would tend to have a handful of the albums. And then every once in a while, you would run into a Floyd guy, a guy who had posters in his room that were exclusively Pink Floyd. Dark Side of the Moon, The Wall, and then that guy would be the dude who would have the Syd Barrett recordings and some of the Syd Barrett solo stuff. And usually those guys would have glass, like a toke or two. They have like a graphics bong. They would have like some kind of high caliber quality pot smoking device that they kept clean. They would have like Ozium, a set of tools for cleaning the resin out of these guys. They weren't the clogged one hitter guy. You know what I mean? Because there was a lot of pot smokers that were like that back in my day. They would go here and hand you a clogged one hitter, and then I would have to go and grab a coat hanger and a large side cutter, cut a chunk out of the side cutter, make a little curly Q with a 6-inch rod, put a leather glove on, get that coat hanger nice and bright red hot with a propane torch, and then run it through, pushing out a 3-inch turd of resin, a screeching, steaming 3-inch long, and then he'd be like, "Give me that," like, oh, that was his prized possession. Like, dude, I didn't want your resin, I just wanted to clean your one hitter for you. And then by the next time you would see him, you would have to repeat this process. So eventually you'd get wise, and you would be like, you know what, we're gonna smoke out of my pipe. I'll make a tin foil pipe for us to smoke out of. Most of the guys that wore the jean jackets, and when I say that, there wasn't much blue jean material exposed, but because they were covered in band patches. So those guys with the Aerosmith and the Led Zepelin, those guys with the facial hair, these were the type of guys that they lived to steal each other's girlfriends. That's what it was all about, was just stealing girlfriends from people, and selling like bags of cloves, whatever spice they could find in their mom's cupboard that they could sell to someone in like 6th grade and tell them it was marijuana, and rip them off for $15. These are the types of guys that were into Led Zepelin and Aerosmith. Okay? They knew about Floyd, but they weren't really into them because those guys were faggots. They were pink, and they had faggot talk. Okay? Which just means they were born in Britain. They had English accents, and that's how that dividing line was made. Like, the majority of the guys that you ran into that hung out at the forest preserves with a 6-pack of beer and a frisbee, maybe they had a boom box that they would have the radio playing on. They never really had cassettes running in the boombox because the batteries were always too dead to run the motors, but they might be strong enough to pick up the local station if you selected it to monophonic sound. Stereo, not enough current left in the battery cells to support a stereo broadcast at the woods. So this was the type of music fans and the type of personalities and the types of people you would run into in this period of time. And most of those guys that I was talking about, they were like kind of leftovers from the 70s. You know what I mean? Like, there was a new thing coming around in 85. Like bands like The Police, bands like King Crimson was around. So there was a whole nother like group of people that, like, maybe they started out as Deadheads, but then they found out about the Talking Heads, and they found out about New Wave. And there was people that, like, they had seen Koyaanisqatsi at the theater, and those guys were these were the guys you could buy LSD from, So by the time, basically my story was, my folks had a turntable, and there was a record collection in my house that had the James Bond soundtracks from all the James Bond movies. And my dad heard these albums by a guy named Harry Nilsson, who was friends with the Beatles. And those Nilsson albums are great. They're really great albums. There's a lot of really cool people that played on some of the later Nilsson stuff. And if you've ever heard about John Lennon when he left his wife, Yoko Ono, he was gone for a while. He was in LA with this guy, Harry Nilsson, drinking on this lost weekend, they call it. They just did a movie about that. There's a girl named um, May Pang, yeah, who's still around, that was John Lennon's lover at this time. Yoko Ono hired her and then sent her off with John to the West Coast. They got sick of each other. And that Nilsson dude is a really talented vocalist, singer, songwriter guy that a lot of people don't really know much about him. But his albums are gold mine. He's great. Like, you won't find better music than Harry Nilsson music. And really, like, when I was coming up, that was all like a little bit old. The previous generation knew about him. Really, nobody knew who Nilsson was. But nonetheless, he was a psychedelic guy. He was turned on and he was brilliant. But my folks had that music. I tore through that. And then my brother started buying the Beatles albums. He bought the first Devo album, which is really good. Brian Eno produced that. Q, Are We Not Men? A, We Are Devo. Fantastic album. Really imaginative. So I was listening to pre-LSD Beatles, and then because we went through the Beatles collection in the timeline that they were released. And by the time I had really dissolved or absorbed the post-LSD Beatles stuff, I was being introduced to Pink Floyd, and that was because I was listening to FM, classic rock radio. And I would stay home from school with a cassette in the tape machine on pause, record on pause. And any song that came on that I thought it might be Pink Floyd, I would roll that tape. And I would usually get about 2 songs if I stayed home from school. So 2 Pink Floyd songs out of a whole day. And I had a cassette with headphones that had broke. So I put the headphones inside these. They were for a shooting range, so they would seal up really good, and you couldn't hear. Because I had to hide all my music. My mom was a Christian, and that was rock and roll was it was the devil's business. So she did find my tour book and T-shirt from the first Roger Waters. My first concert was Roger Waters. She found that and destroyed it, threw it away. She used to throw my Pink Floyd tapes in the river. So I began my collection of Pink Floyd tapes on my birthday. My brother got me Obscured by Clouds and The Wall. I had gotten a cassette copy of The Wall when it came out. They were playing Brick 2 on the radio, and so I got a copy of it. I got a copy of it from the store where I met my wife. They had a music section, and I got it there. Now, I wore that tape out, so I got another copy from my brother. I wore that tape out. I went through 3 copies of it's 2 cassettes, The Wall. And my father passed away in there when I was 15. It was just before my 16th birthday, and so it was tough. I was really knee deep in The Wall as far as absorbing that album completely and really like playing the living shit out of it. Like I said, I went through 3 copies of it, and my dad died, and I was in a school where it was a really small school. There was 26 kids in the high school. It was a religious school. It was really strict, and I was bullied. I was not accepted there. I was treated really poorly. So Pink Floyd, for me, it was like a little bit more than just any of the other bands that I had become a relationship with their music before then. Pink Floyd was on a much deeper level that I connected with them and their message, So it was kind of a religious thing for me, Pink Floyd. And what I found in their music, like there was a sense of melancholy, like this infinite thing in there that was true. It was truth. that I found in there. But there really wasn't much hope. Whatever hope, it's very British. It's like it'll be kind of an afterthought, you know, like. But then the sun came up. You know, it's very much like Waters will just throw you a crumb just so you don't, you know. So when like basically right after my dad died, Pink Floyd broke up, and I had absorbed all of it. Gilmour's solo album came out, which I did not go see him. The tickets were too expensive, but I did get a ticket to see Roger Waters, and I went. My dad had died, but he had a woman that he worked with. And I don't know if they had an affair or what the deal was. Maybe they did. I don't know. I know he bought her a ring. My mom found this receipt for this ring, and she thought, well, maybe John bought this for me and never gave it to me because he died. And then this woman, like we had these catalogs from Germany. It was a place kind of like Sears and Roebuck, these catalogs, and they had jewelry in it. And he had ordered this big gaudy ring. So my mom had the number. She found the receipt. So she knew what the ring looked like. And then at my dad's funeral, this woman was wearing that ring. So anyway, we had gotten together with that family and done a bunch of activities with them. And I had become friends with their kids. They had 2 boys that were like my age. And they were total Pink Floyd fanatics. And they lived in these suburbs where all the kids did was smoke pot. So that was my introduction to that thing, like hanging around with some guys that were older than me that were doing bongs all the time. They were funny. They were intelligent guys, you know. So yeah, I got a ticket with that other dude, Mark, and my mom dropped me off at their house. My mom had no idea what I was doing. I went to Rosemont Horizon. On July 28th, 1984, I saw my first Roger Waters concert. It was The Pros and Cons of Hitchhiking. That's his first solo album. And I had met this guy, we'll call him John. I met this guy, John, at my job. I was a bag boy at the grocery store. And this guy, he knew my brother. And he knew me because I had acted in these Super 8 movies that my brother made. My brother made a bunch of these movies. Well, we made them together. And they were good. You can actually see some of that stuff if you look for Sesame Sewer, Cry Baby Cry, and One. There's 3 of these movies that are on YouTube now. They're worth looking up. Sesame Sewer is really something. Anyway, this guy was a huge fan of the Grateful Dead, and he sold LSD. So I became friends with that guy. I'm still friends with him. He's a successful entrepreneur, this guy. Anyway, that guy gave me a hit of this Black Dove LSD, and I took that and went to see Roger Waters' first solo tour. And that was my first significant real concert, The Pros and Cons of Hitchhiking, and it was unbelievable. It was on the same level as The Wall. They had the screen, the light show, the stage with a ramp up behind it where Waters could go up there and walk. It was just unbelievable to see Roger Waters performing live. We had good seats, you know, and the show was fantastic. The band they were a world-class band, but they didn't play the music. They didn't honor the albums. They did live versions of everything. They did real jazzy versions of everything. Now they had Mel Collins on saxophone and Eric Clapton played guitar. And I was lucky enough to see that first leg of the U.S. tour that Eric Clapton, because he only was on that tour for a short time and he bailed. So I saw my first concert. It was Eric Clapton and Roger Waters. And the bootleg for that concert is up on YouTube. You can go and listen to it and read the stories. Everybody was tripping. Apparently I wasn't the only one at that show. Everyone was tripping. And there was like an acid panic that happened. They took a break after an hour and a half of Floyd, and he said we'll be back with the pros and cons of hitchhiking, but people didn't understand him, and they all panicked, and a bunch of people left. But yeah, that was my first concert. So, and it made quite quite an impression on me. Nothing ever really. The only time I go and it like has a thing where I'm walking around like 3 weeks later and I'm still kind of buzzing from it is when I see Roger. So I like my last show that I saw, my last real big concert. It was This Is Not a Drill tour, Roger Waters' last tour, and it was on the same date. It was July 28th. Again, it was 38 years to the date. And I took a mushroom. I took 1 gram of a golden teacher, so I was tripping. And that guy that sold me the hit of acid from the first one was there, and he came up to my seats on break and hugged me and everything. And I was all like beaming. I was all like, "This is great." He's sober now, that guy. But yeah, I had a huge pile of tissues from crying. I saw The Wall on my birthday, which was really cool. That was 2012. I had a huge lump in my throat, and man, I relived a lot of stuff from like losing my father, and it was great to see The Wall and see how he modernized it, but it was really that infinite sadness thing because the world hasn't changed. It's kind of even gotten worse since then. But the second tour was the Radio Chaos tour. I saw that 3 times. And I remember bringing equipment to bootleg it. And we were all tripping. It was me and like some guys from my band. And I had a tape machine. I had a Fedora with a stereo microphone inside of it that you would like pop these mics out. And I had a battery pack and then a stereo tape machine with Dolby. And these cables that would run down my shirt inside and go into this tape. Like a metal tape. And it was an expensive little setup that I had put together for bootlegging shows. And it worked great. It worked really, really well. And I was worried because they were patting people down, so I split up the equipment between my buddies. And the one guy took off and went into the bathroom and threw, I think it was the microphone or it might have been the battery pack. He threw it in the garbage because he got scared. He didn't want to get... So I was unable to tape the Radio Chaos tour, but I have a VHS copy of it, a bootleg that I bought from some Canadian guy. It was like a mail order deal. But I went back another time. I remember it was the first time that I had really significantly consumed psychedelic mushrooms, and I wasn't really aware of how much I should get. And there was a local guy who was like the drug guy. He was a heroin addict, and he was like, "Hey man, I'm getting a line on some good shrooms. If you know anybody that wants something like that." So I said, "Well, the Roger Waters concert is coming up, and that's what I would like to do if I'm going to experience that." So I said, "How much is a 1/4 ounce?" I knew nothing about like amounts of psychedelic mushrooms. He said it's $40. So I gave him the money up front, and then he gives me this bag of shrooms, which was over. It was considerably over. That guy was growing the shrooms in his basement. I went there later, and there was vermiculite all over the floor. So yeah. Anyway, and that's like the potting soil that you use to grow mushrooms. Anyway, I had no idea. I asked him, I said, well, he wouldn't tell me a dose. And I said, well, let's say I take this quarter ounce of mushrooms and I split it in half and I give half to my buddy and I take half. Will I get off? And he goes, oh, yeah. So I gave half to my buddy. I probably took a little bit over for me. And I consumed that, and then we went to the Radio Chaos show. It was the third time for me to see it. So I knew what I was in for. Now, the Radio Chaos, if you've never listened to that album, Roger simulates a nuclear holocaust at the end of the album. You have 4 minutes to live. The bombs are in the air. They're flying. It's the end of the world. So I experienced that while I was tripping my balls off because I probably had 4 grams of mushrooms in me, and that's like a heroic dose for me. I'm a real lightweight, like an eighth of a gram. Now at this point, like, is more than enough for me, and I was on 4 grams. So I ended up having nuclear holocaust nightmares, recurring nightmares for 15 years. Oopsies. Anyway, I wanted to tell you guys about my Roger Waters concert experiences. I hope he comes around again. I know he's going to be doing his Dark Side of the Moon thing. So if I get a chance for that, I definitely will be buying a ticket. I can't wait to hear Roger's version of Dark Side of the Moon. I listened to the Money. I think that was the first one that he dropped, and I stopped listening to it. I want to get the whole thing. I'm going to take some Penolius Cyanescence mushroom and put the headphones on, take an edible, and 200 milligrams of niacin, an ounce of lion's mane, and a glass of lemonade. Close my eyes and hit play. So that's my plan. If you've seen Roger Waters, I would love to hear your experience with that. If you're here to spew negativity and take a shot at the guy or promote David Gilmour, you're missing the point. I'm a fan of Roger Waters. I'm a fan of Pink Floyd. I'm a fan of David Gilmour. So let's keep things on that level of being positive. That was the thing about Pink Floyd's music. It always seemed to have a message about treating other people and Mother Earth with respect and love. That's what it seemed. It seemed to me there was an underlying theme that was like, if you have a chance to get over on somebody, take advantage of somebody, be nasty, be negative, be mean, whatever it is. That's not what that music was about. It was about the other side of things, the other side of that coin. You know what I mean? Maybe I read into it a bit much. I don't think so. I think that's a really boiling it down and oversimplifying it to its basic core. I think that's Roger would agree with me. He said that the core song of the Wall album was Bring the Boys Back Home. And he said that song has multiple meanings. Besides the obvious one, the troops, he also said it applied to musicians. Not letting the task of creating this rock and roll at this level circumvent their responsibility as a good husband, a good father. I thought, man, oh man, I never saw that coming. But if you've ever seen him perform that, it explains how emotional he gets in there. All right, you guys, take care of yourselves, hug your pets, and peace.